Good evening, everybody. My name is Penny Rivers and I'm the Vice Chair of this committee and will be chairing this evening. I'd like to remind attendees joining via Zoom that they should have cameras and microphones turned off during the meeting unless invited to speak. And for your own privacy, camera backgrounds should be set to blurred. Members and officers, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. Please may any questions be kept brief and to the point, and would ward councillors sit separately from the committee while applications in their own ward are being considered and voted on by this committee. Please have your mobile phones and handheld devices on silent. If a fire alarm sounds at any time during the meeting and we're not expecting one, everyone in the council chamber should leave immediately through the nearest fire exits. Please proceed calmly to the assembly point on the Berries Field across from the car park. I'd like to remind everyone present this evening that this meeting is being webcast and will be capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the council chamber, it is likely that cameras will capture your image. You are deemed to be consenting to this and to the use of those images and sound recording for webcasting and/or training purposes. If you are speaking, your contribution will be recorded and broadcast. May I also remind members of the public in attendance this evening that we appreciate respect to be shown to all of those speaking at the meeting. Interruptions or disrespectful behaviour will not be tolerated. So we come to agenda number 1, apologies for absence. Kim.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Clark, Rubini, Spence and Steiger. Councillor Beeman is substituting.
Thank you. And we're now going to take agenda item number 4 before we come to the minutes. Mr. Foy, you have submitted a question and had an answer. Do you have a supplementary question? Is Mr. Foy here? He is not here.
Either, Chair. He's not online.
And not online. So we will come to agenda item number 2, which is the minutes. Do you so approve the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. And declarations of interest?
None received prior to the meeting, Chair.
And none in the meeting. Are there any? We haven't got any other questions. No. And there are no questions from members, so we come to agenda item number 6, which is relevant updates to government guidance or legislation since we last met. Claire.
Members, just one piece, just to confirm that the new regulations relating to the way local plans will be made came into force on the 25th of March.
Thank you. And agenda item number 7, the appeals decisions. Are there any questions? Otherwise, do you so note? Thank you. Now we come to our applications. We should all listen respectfully to all speakers, whether they're members of this committee, ward councillors, or members of the public. No disturbance or heckling will be tolerated. Should our meeting go on for a long time this evening, we will have a short recess. All councillors must act fairly, openly, and apolitically. We must approach each planning application with an open mind and avoid preconceived opinions. We must carefully weigh up all the relevant issues and determine each application on its own individual planning merits. We must avoid undue contact with any interested parties and ensure that the reasons for our decisions are clearly stated. Our decisions must be made in accordance with the relevant statutory framework, to include the National Planning Policy Framework, our own planning policies, and any other material planning considerations. Members and public speakers, you have 4 minutes to speak, and this will be adhered to. So we come to the first application, which is WA 2025-0201-001 Thornbrook House. This application is in Godalming North, which is the ward that I represent. But in the absence of any other chair, I will chair this, I will not speak on it, and I will not vote. Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So this is an application for full planning permission for a 2-storey extension to provide 4 duplex flats with alterations to other flats within the building, as well as a replacement external staircase. There is also a row of 5 terraced 2-storey houses to the rear of the site. The extension relates to Thornbrook House, which is on an estate known as Wayside Park, close to Cattershaw Lane, to the east of Godalming Town Centre. Thornbrook House was previously an office building, but was converted to 34 flats under prior approval, which is an extension of permitted development rights. The River Way runs to the rear or the north of the site, and this is where the terraced houses are proposed. Moving on to the site location plan, the red line boundary runs around the part of the site that applicant has control over. The wider estate, as you can see there, Standard House, Huxley House, Sutton House, Salisbury House and Weybrook House is privately owned, but the applicant does have a right of access from Cattershaw Lane. The main constraints affecting this site are flood risk zones, as can be seen there. Most of the site, including Thornbrook House itself, is within Zone 1, which is therefore at low risk of flooding from the river. The rear gardens for proposed houses would partially be in Flood Zone 2, which is medium probability of flooding, and the northern part, most part of the red line boundary is in Flood Zone 3, which is equivalent to 1% or greater annual probability of river flooding. The part of the site closest to the river, as you can see in the bottom corner there, is within a biodiversity opportunity area. These opportunity areas within the borough feature high concentrations of important wildlife habitat and are generally priority areas for targeting biodiversity improvements. These photos show the south-facing and north-facing elevations of Thornbrook House, with the latter being the principal entrance, as you can see there. So the east-facing elevation is prominent on approaching the entrance as you walk around the side of the building, and is also visible from Panda House and the now demolished Riverview House, which I'll just go back to. This slide, you can see Panda House there just to the east, and where Riverview House used to stand. As you can see, the surrounding buildings are of similar design and scale and also are in residential use. Just moving on to the northern part of the site where the terrace housing is to be proposed. You can see there the parking spaces and the tree line adjacent to the river beyond. And then again, some more photos of the vegetation and also the communal amenity area to Weybrook House, which just sits to the northwest of Thornbrook House. Going on to the block plan, this demonstrates that the rear gardens of the terraced properties, the terraced houses, would join the vegetation without resulting in the removal of the vegetation, but there would be a loss of 43 car parking spaces. The bin stores proposed by this application would be in the eastern boundary of the site for Thornbrook House, and then just to the northeastern corner for the new houses. Electric vehicle charging points would be provided to 6 spaces just next to the entrance to Thornbrook House. Moving on to the terraced houses, they are all 3-bedroom properties with a combined living, kitchen, dining room on the ground floor and bedrooms on the third floor. The gardens would feature a raised terrace given the site levels. They have all been designed to meet passive house standards. For the extension, the new duplex flats are arranged over the third and fourth stories with, again, living space on the lower floor along with a terrace. And then on the upper floor, you have two double bedrooms. So a double bedroom and a single bedroom, my apologies. These drawings you can also see just on the south there, the replacement fire escape staircase, which is also proposed by this application. Just showing you the elevations here. So the proposed extension you can see there is most prominent on the east facing elevation, where you can also see the fire escape staircase. Moving on to the elevations of terraced housing, these feature what's called ziggurat, kind of detailing to what's almost a front outrigger to these properties. They also feature round windows and integral planters. The colour to these and the ground floor, as I'll move on to, appears pink, but would in reality be a terracotta coloured glass reinforced concrete. The other materials, as you can see, are red brick and slate roof tiles. And then also on this visual, the colours maybe slightly off, but the new extension and the replacement fire escape would be a terracotta coloured cladding, which is considered to complement the red brick of the existing building. You can see also that the staircase is going to be a mixture of perforated and ribbed fibre cement cladding, just to allow some air and ventilation through to the staircase. So the recommendation today for you in front of you is for approval, subject to conditions outlined in the report and a Section 106 agreement to secure biodiversity net gains that would be delivered off-site. The on-site biodiversity net gain can be secured by condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. There are 3 speakers. The first is Caroline Weeks. Caroline, you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
That one. There we go. Okay. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of residents of Weybrook House, as you've seen, a neighbouring property on the plans there. We're here to formally object to this planning application on the grounds of planning policy, public safety, and I would respectfully suggest a legal obligation on this council to act on the evidence presented. Firstly, we wish to highlight the issue of overdevelopment, cramming and character. Policy GOD5 of the Godalming and Farncombe Neighbourhood Plan is clear and states that development must avoid the appearance of cramming. Squeezing 5 two-storey houses into an existing car park within an already constrained site is precisely what that policy was written to prevent. Godalming Town Council's own planning committee reached the same conclusion at their meeting in October of last year, finding the proposal not only represents overdevelopment, but is out of keeping with the current character of Cattershall Lane. Next, we would raise the concern around fire safety. Surrey Fire and Rescue Service have written to this council confirming that they have an inspection history at Thornbrook House. They have found repeated and serious issues with fire alarms, emergency lighting and fire doors that they state have never been properly addressed. They have further confirmed that the submitted plans contain insufficient detail to assess compliance with fire access requirements under approved document B. This application seeks to add further dwellings to a building with known unresolved fire safety deficiencies. We would ask you to consider the gravity of that position. We do also note the planning officer's comments regarding this being outside the scope of the application, but we do consider this a serious concern. We also wish to highlight the issue of parking. The County Highway Authority has acknowledged in its own response that the proposed provision falls short of Waverley Borough Council's own parking standards by 15 spaces. Godalming Town Council has already warned that this will lead to overspill onto surrounding streets, worsening congestion that residents in this area already experience daily. We would also highlight that the current parking provision along Cattershall Lane is already problematic in terms of congestion, but that numerous spaces are also due to be removed for the installation of electric vehicle charging points, further leading to a reduction in available parking. Policy DM9 of the local plan part 2 exists for exactly this reason, and this shortfall is a clear breach of it. The Pollution Control Officer has raised concerns in their submission regarding potentially contaminated land, which causes us further concern, especially where this consideration has been omitted entirely from the application. Where land may be contaminated, the applicant must demonstrate that the site is suitable or can be made suitable for the proposed use before permission is granted. That evidence does not exist here. Granting permission on the basis of an incomplete and misleading assessment would be directly contrary to national policy and would, in our respectful submission, expose any approval to strong legal challenge. Lastly, we would again draw the committee's attention to a very similar earlier application, reference WA 2023-00-666, which relates to Wayside Park adjacent to Weirview House. This is not the first time that this council has been asked to consider development of this character at this location. This application was refused on precisely the grounds that we have raised, namely overdevelopment and the proposed building being out of keeping with the local landscape. The planning inspector noted that the dwellings would have, and I quote, an awkward and uncomfortable visual relationship within their setting and would not reflect the form or grain of the existing development. This establishes a clear local precedent that Waverley's own decision makers have previously found this type of development unacceptable at this location. We again note the planning officer's suggestion that each application is judged on its own merits, but we would suggest that to take this view shows an unfair decision-making process concerning both the previous applicant and the local residents who are impacted by this. We would respectfully suggest that this precedent is followed and this application be refused.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Brian Starr. You two have 4 minutes.
Dear Planning Committee, I'm Brian Staff. I'm the planning consultant here to represent the applicant. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and address you this evening. As set out in the officer's report, we've engaged proactively with the council through the pre-application service to ensure that our proposals would be supported. The submission has to some extent been moulded by the feedback during this pre-application advice, and following the submission of this application, we have worked further with officers to revise the proposals and address the comments and concerns raised during the assessment, both from council and those raised by third parties. To that end, the recommendations set out in the agenda is endorsed. The development of this site is at the forefront of the key objectives set out in national and local planning policies, and where the tilted balance should favour sustainable development in such locations. The proposal seeks to make efficient use of this brownfield site, alleviating pressure on the development of the greenbelt, areas of outstanding natural beauty and residential gardens. This is particularly relevant given the limited housing supply identified by the borough. The proposal builds on previous approvals for additional stories of accommodation on Thornbrook House and other wider developments that have taken place in this former business park, which has steadily evolved from the office environment to a residential area. The additional stories would result in a complementary and sympathetic addition to this building. The surplus hard standing and parking spaces to the north of Thornbrook House provide an ample opportunity to deliver a policy compliant mix of housing without detracting from the character and the visual amenities of the locality. The development of the proposed housing strikes a suitable balance between the delivery of much needed housing while preserving the character of the area. The site is not without its constraints, but the proposal is considered to assimilate successfully in this environment, bordered by the office park to the south and the riverway to the north. It offers a reasonable separation distance to surrounding residential development, so as not to give rise to impact on privacy, access to light and outlook, while ensuring a suitable buffer to the riverbank to the north. The proposal embraces sustainability initiatives and designed to passive house standards. The proposal also offers significant biodiversity improvements and an opportunity to introduce sustainable drainage of surface water. We therefore respectfully request that members endorse the officer's recommendation and approve the application. If I could just respond to Ms Weeks' objections to the scheme in the sense of cramming and overdevelopment. That does not, the proposal does not manifest itself in such a way where this does appear crammed and overdeveloped. As set out in the officer's report, there are suitable distances to residential properties, suitable level of parking, suitable amenity standards that don't display this being a cramped and overdevelopment. There's reference to the appeal decision. That is a distinctly different environment in which that proposal was considered. And as set out, each case has to be set on its own merits. The architect following my speech will obviously go into why we consider that the grain, the rhythm and form of our development complies, whereas the appeal decision did not. In relation to parking, that it is correct to set out that there is a relatively minor shortfall in the amount of parking spaces. To that extent, we provided a parking survey that looked at the parking environment within the business park, Thornbury Business Park and Cattershall Road, which set out that there was ample amount of spaces available. The parking stress was certainly so low as not to be considered significant. In terms of contamination, there is a condition within the officer's recommendation that sets out that we would be providing a report looking at the investigation of the soil in that area, and where necessary, intrusive investigation and remediation will take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Staff. And the third speaker is Mr. Morris, Mr. Phil Morris. You two have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you, Brian and Russell. My name is Phil Morris. I'm the architect here on behalf of Almanac. At Almanac, we have a track record of delivering sustainable, well-considered and contextually rooted residential projects. Our proposals for Thornbrook House provide a logical evolution of Wayside Park, delivering much-needed family homes. Turning first to the new terrace, where we propose 5 3-bedroom passive house homes on the northern edge of the site. The land is currently underused car park, and we are only building on the car park, not on any existing green space. And by building here, we make an efficient and sustainable use of the site. The footprint of the terrace is oriented and carefully positioned between Weybrook House to the north and Weirview House to the south. Its placement complements the existing pattern of development, reinforcing the established rhythm and effectively completing the architectural arrangement of the wider site. And in this way, it is no way similar to the appeal decision of the dwellings that were proposed adjacent to Weirview House more recently. Site constraints were carefully considered, and the 8-metre wildlife buffer is strictly maintained adjacent to the river, ensuring that the riverbank remains an ecological corridor. The houses are joyful and functional. They use a palette of red brick and slate, echoing the appearance of Thornbrook House, but using higher quality materials, ensuring they sit comfortably within the setting. At Almanac, sustainability is a non-negotiable. We have an in-house passive house designer, and these homes are designed to the Passive House Classic standard, providing ultra-high performance building fabric to ensure the homes have minimal operational energy and running costs for future residents. And we target a 70% reduction in CO2 emissions over current building regs. Regarding the extension to Thornbrook House, our approach has been one of restraint, alignment, and delight. We propose 4 light-filled dual-aspect duplexes, each with 2 bedrooms above the southern wing of Thornbrook House, each with its own private balcony. Following pre-application feedback, we refined the massing to ensure the addition remains subservient to the 1980s architecture. And as Russell said, the use of the terracotta fibre cement panels mirrors the tones of the existing brickwork, while clearly identifying the extension as modern and high-quality addition. And just a note on the fire regulations, again, it's worth mentioning that the existing fire conditions in Thornbrook House can't be considered as part of this application, but I can assure you that the design of the new dwellings and the new extension have been designed with the utmost consideration of Part B, are in accordance with that document. We've also taken the opportunity to resolve some long-standing site issues. The external stair has been reimagined as a sculptural element, integrating into the facade rather than acting as an ancillary afterthought. And we're also providing new refuse storage for the whole building and cycle storage for the new dwellings in alignment with current standards. This is a well-designed scheme which provides meaningful sustainability, ecological uplift, and I would therefore ask the committee to support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. So, members, over to you. Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Parking seems to be the big issue here. No objection, I think, to the development as such. Probably the design is not to everybody's taste, but we're not here. I think in planning terms, it seems to work. But I'm reading the report. 43 parking spaces are being removed throughout the whole estate, leaving 51 throughout the whole estate. And I think there's nine new houses here, and one assumes that they would need provision in some way for 2 cars per household. This is 2026 after all, and that does seem a bit tight to me. Where basically, would there be too many vehicles, too few spaces, and where would the overflow go? And I wonder if the officer could amplify that, please.
Russell.
Thank you, Councillor Moreau, for the question. So I just want to set out the standards. So Surrey County Council identify this as a edge of centre location. So for them, it's nine spaces, or perhaps a few more, depending if there is space. Whereas the council parking standards, they're saying this is a town centre location. So they basically ask for a minimum of, it's 11.5, round that up to 12, given their minimum standards. But the Surrey County Council requirement for those 9 spaces is a maximum. This is an estate where you have no allocated car parking. Surrey County Council Highways did look at this very carefully. There was a parking survey carried out, including Cattershaw Lane. Effectively, having had those conversations with the County Highways Authority, it was considered that while the resultant parking provision would fall short of the council's own guidelines, the applicant's justification through the parking survey would be that it doesn't have an unacceptable level of parking stress in this area. Effectively, the NPPF requires there to be a severe impact on the highway, and the recommendation reflects that this threshold wasn't met. Ultimately, it is an unallocated parking situation, and there is a condition for a parking management plan, which is a betterment of the existing situation. That's a condition of this recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, parking was one of the things that I looked at, because down there in Cattershaw Lane is a nightmare. People are fighting for places down there to park, and I don't think this is going to help the situation at all. But the other thing that concerns me is the flood risk. In one of the photographs that the officer showed us, you can see the cars actually standing in water in the car park area. And I'm just really surprised that the Environment Agency and the Lead Flood Authority have raised no concerns, which I'm really trying to get my head round that. I think that's a bit of a worry for me, to put those houses there. I know a lot of the buildings along Cattershaw Lane had to be rafted or pile driven, and I don't know what the situation is with these new ones. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Gale. So the Lead Local Flood Authority did initially object to this application, but that was to do with sustainable drainage, which the applicant has remedied effectively. They look at the surface water drainage rather than flooding from, say, the riverway. The EA haven't raised an objection to this application. Ultimately, if you're talking about the new houses, they're all going to be built on existing hard standing. So providing kind of residential gardens, which are obviously going to be grass, that's a betterment of its existing situation. I mean, I do recognise that it is kind of constrained by those flood risk areas, but I think the way the properties have been considered in terms of their positioning on the site, pulling them away from the river, and the existing vegetation was not going to be affected by the houses. I think that the flood risk is not going to be adverse for this development, as set out in my report. I mean, they have considered various forms of surface water drainage mitigation. You've got water butts, you've got raised planters, attenuation tank to be on the site, which also has been designed to accommodate climate change as well. And then we've also got a landscaping condition for the hard standing as well to be permeable or porous. So I think we have looked into very carefully the flood risk on this site, but I think given that most of it falls within flood zone 1, they weren't technically required to undertake a flood risk assessment.
Thank you, Carol. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think we all have the same reservations on this site. I remember at one appeal, a KC accused me of going for perfection and saying, you know, the best is often the enemy of the good. Well, of course it is. But if we don't aim for the best and aim for the top, you know, you don't sort of get anywhere, do you? You end up starting at the bottom and staying pretty close. Having said all that, we're not backed here by any statutory consultees with all the things that we think are important. You know, if they say, unfortunately, that the parking is adequate, their word counts more than our word, even, you know, if we dismiss this unanimously. And it's the same with the flood authority. You know, as long as these statutory consultees refuse to follow our desire to provide perfection, we're never going to achieve it. And, you know, I have reservations about this, but I honestly don't think, given the current situation and the fact that the consultees are not going to back up anything that we say, from what I can read, then I'm afraid I think we're going to have to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councillor Coburn summed it up pretty well, but I would like to ask questions on one item that this week's objector raised. There seemed to be a lot of concern about fire safety and what she said. And I think the architect said it wasn't an issue. Could the officers just comment on that, please? Is it an issue or is it not an issue? Thank you.
So in terms of what we can consider as a local planning authority is the new dwellings. So he's quite right in terms of raising that the relevant considerations in the building regulations have been considered and fully taken into account. The Surrey Fire and Rescue were consulted, and whilst they initially raised a few issues, those issues have been confirmed by them to be acceptable. I mean, my professional review is that those current issues would be addressed through the development of the building. Anyway, they're going to upgrade some of the flats and obviously the new flats in the building. So, I mean, those flats are not going to be sellable if you've got fire issues. So I'm confident that those issues would be addressed, but they can't be addressed through this plan application. We just have to look at the new residential units, which, as I say, they do comply with the relevant standards, which are building regulation standards.
So I don't see any other speakers. I'll read the recommendation and just say as a reminder, I will not be voting. The recommendation that delegated authority is granted to the Assistant Director of Planning to grant the planning subject to completion of a Section 106 agreement for the BNG and conditions. Permission therefore be granted. When lights show, please vote.
Thank you, Chair. That is right. I've got 11 votes and I should only have 10. So who has voted that shouldn't have voted? No, I apologise. It's me. I can't count. So that's 10 in favour and 1 abstention, none against. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that is carried. Our second application this evening is WA 2025-02496 Foxdean, Upper Hale Road in Farnham. And this is for the erection of 7 dwellings with alterations to access and associated works following demolition of the existing. Sam, when you're ready.
So the second application under consideration at committee is Foxdean in Hale, Farnham, which is for the erection of 7 dwellings with alterations to the access and associated works following demolition of the existing dwelling and outbuildings. This application has been brought before the planning committee given the number of comments contrary to the officer's recommendation. So Foxdean is a semi-detached property within the Upper Hale area of Farnham. The property sits on a 0.21 hectare plot to the north of Upper Hale Road. The road to the east is Ball and Wicket Lane, and then to the southeast you have the Hale Recreation Ground and Wings Road leading onto the Hale Village Hall. Immediate character is residential with a varied mix of built form, plot sizes and setbacks from the road. So to give you some context, so looking up Upper Hale Road to the northwest, you have the junction with Ball and Wicket Lane and Wings Road. Number 1 Ball and Wicket Lane is sat on the corner. It's a 1970s bungalow with palisade fencing, and then past that you have number 106 Upper Hale, which is a detached property with brick pier frontage. And past that you can just make up the hedging which delineates Foxdean's front boundary. This is looking opposite the site. So front hedging is slightly overgrown, but you can see the varied setbacks and vernacular. You have the host property in number 106, which are earlier additions, and then to the left of the pitch you have later additions, the adjoining number 110 and the Tudor Revival style 1980s properties at Wellesley Gardens. So this is looking from the front aspect of the property. The site was previously very overgrown with bramble scrub, but there was a supervised clearance of that back in December. Again, another front aspect showing the quite large setback of the properties from the road. This is the side aspect of the outbuilding that would be demolished, also in a rather dilapidated state. Here you have the rear aspect of the dwelling to be demolished. And then this is looking across the rear garden. You can just make out the rear of the dwelling in the centre of the picture there. And it is, the plot, given its enclosure, is actually a deceptively large plot in the locality with boundaries flanked by high hedgerows. So the proposed site layout seeks to demolish the existing semi-detached dwelling and erect 7 new dwellings, 3 to the front and 4 to the rear, on a small cul-de-sac arrangement with associated parking for both residents and visitors. That includes a shared carport structure here. You've got the proposed street scene view. So the top view would be from Upper Hale. This would be what you'd be looking at Upper Hale Road, with the bottom being the back of the cul-de-sac looking at the properties. Here you would have, this is maisonette, so a ground floor maisonette, first floor maisonette, and then a 3-bedroom property, and ones at the back are also 3-bedroom. So the building at the front would have a projecting gable end elevation with ground floor red brick coining on edges with stone sills, and window headers, and first floor in tile hanging for the masonette properties. You've got the attached lower rise dual hipped element for plot 1 with the central chimney breast. And then plots 4 and 5, these would have a half hipped roof with hip dormers, full brick elevation under a grey slate tile roof. And then plot 6 and 7 have a brick base with brick coining, first floor render under a half hipped red tile roof form, again with hip dormer windows, and plot 7 includes an attached carport. On the new access, Highways have not objected to the proposal, subject to conditions and a Section 106 obligation ensuring visibility displays are maintained in perpetuity. And the proposal includes a new footpath on the southern aspect to Upper Hale Road, which will also be made Highways land within a Section 106. Overall, there are relatively few planning constraints in this case. The site is in a developed settlement of Farnham in a highly sustainable location. You've got shops, pubs, bus services and sports facilities readily available on foot. The site is not within a conservation area. There are no listed buildings impacted or in proximity to their setting. The site is in flood zone 1 at the lowest risk of flooding. There are no TPOs on site, and the ecological constraints are considered minimal. Site is within the buffer zone of the Thames Basin Heath, but in line with planning policy, we've sought monies through SANG provision and SAM contributions, which is an accepted approach. Natural England have not objected. The proposal provides 6 net dwellings on a windfall site, which, given the context of our significant borough-wide deficiency in housing supply, is a benefit of the proposal that adds further weight in support of the scheme. The proposal would therefore be in accordance with the development plan, and officers are recommending approval of this planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. We have 4 speakers. The first is Carolyn Shires, and I think you're on Zoom. You have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening. For letting me speak. I'm Carolyn Shires, and with my husband Robert have lived at 7 Ball and Wicket Lane for the past 36 years. Our property backs onto the proposed development. Firstly, I would like to say that since the previous occupant stopped using the land behind our property as an allotment, there has been very little disturbance of the plot. This has, over the past 10 years, meant a considerable increase in a variety of wildlife, badgers, foxes, bats and reptiles. Since the site was cleared by the builders and obviously disturbance on the site, we have noticed a lot more nighttime activities by badgers and foxes in our garden. Yesterday, this was sadly brought home to us by finding a dead badger in our lane. There has been little or no consideration for existing wildlife in the plans. There has been an attempt to get more favourable response to the application by referring the site as Brownfield. It is noted on the Brownfield site register, this site is not listed. In the court case, Dartford Borough Council versus Secretary of State for Communications and Local Government being in a built-up area, this does not make it a brownfield site. On the plans, there are 3 trees, T2, T3 and T4. These trees are within our property boundary. We've had no attempt been made to contact us regarding these trees, and the information is totally incorrect. These trees, which they quote with a lifespan of 10 years, are already over 36 years old. The diameter is also inaccurate, and so therefore there is not enough root protection area for the trees as recommended by the Woodland Trust. The Woodland Trusts give the lifespan for our trees as between 100 to 400 years, and at over 36 years old, they are not even fully mature. There is also very little tree planting in the plans to soften the appearance of the proposed buildings. There has been no contact to us regarding right to light and no mention in their survey. The plot nearest to our boundary has a window which, when open, will overlook our property and deny our privacy. Because of the building height of the proposed same plot and our property having small windows to 2 rooms in the rear of our property, both set low down, we take light through these windows from the proposed building site. Our property being in place nearly 100 years, the 20-year rule from the Prescription Act 1832 will apply. As has been expressed by others, this site is not suitable for the quantity of properties planned, nor is the outside infrastructure able to accommodate so many properties on this site. We hope that in its present layout and number of buildings, the application is refused. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Councillor Catherine Powell. Catherine, you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. I speak to you as a local resident. My home is less than 400 metres from this site. The Hale Recreation Ground is less than 50, and the War Memorial, not mentioned by the officer, is less than 30 metres away. The Upper Hale Road is for many a through road used to get from Guildford to Basingstoke, but for local residents it is a narrow historic road with several pinch points, the nearest just over 100 metres to the north of this site. The available highway space there is 7.2 metres, about 24 feet. There is a pavement only on one side, which is less than 3 feet wide, 1 metre, and yet it is a key walking route to a local primary school. Pavement should ideally be 6 feet wide, 2 metres on both sides. Previous traffic surveys have shown this residential historic road takes more traffic every day than the western section of the A31 dual carriageway that runs through Farnham. There has been massive infill development in Upper Hale over the decades. Many properties on the Upper Hale Road have no off-road parking, particularly near this site. As a result, the Hale Rec car park is increasingly used by local residents rather than those visiting the recreation ground, the Hale Institute Village Hall, or the Scout Hut. Using Waverley's parking standards, this development should have 15.5 spaces, but it only has 12, adding to the existing issues. The Farnham Neighbourhood Plan recognises the existing traffic and passing issues and seeks not to increase them. Site access changes have been made to address the highway's concerns about visibility and pedestrian access. However, this proposal comes with significant visual and environmental impacts that will see the existing hedge ripped out altogether in order to support 7 dwellings being crammed into this site. If fewer dwellings were proposed, the site would still be developed and the hedge could have been retained. The Hale War Memorial and the 6 oak trees that have grown from acorns connected from Verdun, the longest and bloodiest engagement in the First World War, are very important to local residents. There is always a good turnout on Remembrance Day, where the names of those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the First and Second World War is read, lest we forget. This site is directly opposite this location, not the Hale Rec, as stated in the officer's report. Development on this site will be highly visible and must therefore be in keeping with the existing architecture, and the proposed development is not. Of particular concern is the building line being brought forward much closer to the road, dominating the street scenes, and the rear buildings on higher ground being 2.5 stories. These will tower over the existing properties on Ball and Wicket Lane. Previous applications for this site for 5 dwellings have been withdrawn because of concerns that this reflected overdevelopment. Now suddenly 7 dwellings are being recommended for approval by officers because of the ongoing lack of a 5-year housing land supply. A small number of local dwellings, but a massive local impact. Local residents are not saying no development on this site. It has been allowed to become an eyesore. What residents are saying is not this scale of development on this site. 4 dwellings that blend into the existing building line and height, yes. This proposal, no. Please refuse this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. And our next speaker is Andy Stallen. You two have 4 minutes from when you start.
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. The principle of residential development is acceptable and in accordance with the local plan. There is a significant identified need for family homes in Waverley and nationally. The scheme would contribute good quality homes, meeting some of that pressing need, as agreed by officers. The lack of a 5-year housing supply provides a presumption in favour of approval. Smaller windfall sites such as this are needed to ensure a continual supply of housing. The application provides a well-considered and policy-compliant redevelopment of an existing residential site. The scheme would make effective, worthwhile use of this underutilised site, which is also not contributing positively to the street scene as it stands. The proposals comprise a well-designed bespoke scheme that will enhance the overall appearance of the area. The density proposed is not high, it is below the average for the area. The applicants have worked hard with officers to evolve and improve the scheme design, successfully addressing scale and character. Officers agree that the proposal would be a high-quality design that is well related to the size, scale and character of its surroundings in accordance with relevant policies. Appropriately sized gardens are provided for the properties, similar to others in Upper Hale Road, Wings Road, Bishops Road and Folly Lane North. In terms of neighbour amenity, the proposed dwellings have been very carefully sited and designed to not cause material harm. The setting and outlook from number 110 would be significantly improved. Existing overlooking windows have been removed. A sunlight daylight report clearly demonstrates the acceptability of the proposals in this respect. Officers conclude that subject to conditions, including obscure glazing conditions, the proposed development would not result in material harm to the residential amenity of neighbouring properties in accordance with relevant policies. The scheme provides appropriate levels of parking, including visitor spaces, proportionate and appropriate to the location, scale and type of development proposed. Previous concerns relating to highway matters have been overcome in this application, including sightlines. Sustainable transport modes are promoted via a cycle parking condition and highway improvements are proposed, including a new footpath along the frontage. This is a significant benefit of the scheme for both the development and other public users, which should be given positive weight. The Highway Authority is satisfied that safe and suitable access for all users is provided. Environmental considerations have also been considered and properly addressed through reports, including ecology, biodiversity net gain and drainage. Working with your officers and statutory consultees, there are no technical concerns remaining, subject to appropriate Section 106 obligations and conditions. Please recognise that although there are concerns, there is also significant support for this development, highlighting the benefits of improving a long-standing unsightly site, enhancing safety and introducing features such as a new public footpath on the frontage. The proposal has been thoughtfully approached to fully address previous and current concerns. In conclusion, this is a well-balanced and appropriate scheme, making efficient and worthwhile use of an existing residential site, delivering much-needed family homes and addressing all relevant planning considerations. The benefits of the proposal are considered to clearly outweigh the concerns raised. We respectfully request that the committee supports its officers' well-considered conclusions and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker on this application is Councillor Tony Fairclough as the ward councillor.
Thank you for letting me speak on this matter. Guidance may well indicate that 7 dwellings can be built on a plot like this. However, just because you can do something, it doesn't mean that you should, especially on this site. To be truly effective, planning should prioritise people over process. It is people who will have to live within and alongside the 7 dwellings proposed. And since 7 dwellings is simply too many for this site, it is people who will suffer. Local residents are not against building new homes upon this site. However, what they want to see is a new application for a smaller number of dwellings. A new application that acknowledges and incorporates 3 key elements. That the new dwelling nearest Upper Hale Road is set back from or positioned in line with number 106, thus reducing the dominance and not intruding upon the street scene. That the roadside hedge is retained so that it too preserves the street scene, and that the rear buildings on higher ground maintain the skyline above Ball and Wicket Lane. Ideally, these should be bungalows. They certainly should not be 2.5 stories high. Residents do understand that there will be several dwellings built upon the site. However, what they cannot understand is the decision to recommend building 7 of them. 7 new homes will mean at least 12 extra vehicles for residents and visitors. There will also be extra collections and almost certainly extra deliveries, all of which will add to the traffic issues on the already congested Upper Hale Road. 7 dwellings require parking provision resulting in an almost complete loss of habitats, for which the proposed planting of 8 trees offers minimal mitigation. Residents are also concerned that the allocated spaces are too few and will result in additional ad hoc parking along Queen's Road, opposite the application site at the border of the Hale Recreation Ground. The cramped nature of the site means that cycle storage will be at a distance from the house doors, that a bin store is in full view from the road, that 2 gardens are significantly under the space requirements and in one case inaccessible without walking in the road to reach it. Squeezing 7 dwellings into the available space will also compromise the design of the dwellings to the detriment of the current characteristics of this village centre location. The Farnham design statement says that no buildings in Upper Hale and Upper Hale are higher than 2 stories, yet here it is proposed to position 2 2.5-storey dwellings on the high ground above the bungalows of Ball and Wicket Lane, where they will dominate the skyline. Residents are also concerned that there is no transport statement, no drainage strategy, no flood risk assessment and an ecological assessment unreviewed by the Surrey Wildlife Trust. And yet, as I said earlier, they do accept that several dwellings will be built on this site, and they are happy for this to happen so long as the character of the village is preserved. Their preferred option is for 4 detached dwellings to be built, acknowledging and incorporating the elements covering the setback, hedge and skyline. On behalf of both the residents who currently live locally and those who will move into the new dwellings, I urge committee members to reject this application for 7 new dwellings and request that the applicant submits a more appropriate application for 4 dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, the floor is yours. Councillor Weldon.
Thank you. I want to begin with just some general remarks, which I've made before. We know that in Waverley we are faced with 2 competing obligations. We are obliged to provide a substantial number of new homes, and we are also obliged to protect our green spaces. To do that, we're going to have to compromise, and I've said before that the primary means of effecting that compromise will be by increasing densities. I have seen in the objections to this proposal some concern that it will destroy the character of the area. There is no way you can achieve our obligations without affecting the character of the area. That is just simple reality. So in broad terms, my instinct would have been to support this application. However, listening to the residents and the concerns, I agree with Councillor Fairclough and other residents. There is room for development on the site, but 7 is just too much. I was also interested in the suggestion that residents would support 4. That's exactly the number that I was instinctively thinking about. So I would go along with the recommendation to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn and then Councillor.
Yes, very interesting listening to Councillor Weldon. I'm not going to put a figure on what can be achieved on this site, but I don't think this is good enough, and I don't think it's the optimum number. It's for a variety of reasons. One is the way that it does come forward, and although you can say there's no building line on the Hale Road, there are repeated patterns along the Upper Hale Road. And I think this, you know, will stand out and be an appropriate, but it is really that amenity space question. There's nothing sadder than driving up and down the country at the moment and seeing these new estates with these tiny bits of amenity space, all chopped up by close boarded fencing. And you think, you know, what's going to happen in here? You might be able to sit down with a glass of beer or something in the evening, but I mean, you're not going to have room for a shed, and no deer's going to squeeze itself over that fence to get in and join you. You know, we have got to think ahead to when we give permission. And, you know, we have got here some inadequacy in terms of amenity space. In terms of character, I think we could do better. In terms of overlooking, again, you know, I think we should reconsider this. I'm not putting a number on it. I don't know what the ideal number is on this site. Maybe 7, but it's not, I'm afraid, this 7. I think the architecture is particularly uninspiring. You know, if you're going to do something and bring it forward of the building line, then at least you want something that people sort of say, good heavens, you know, wow. But we all know the issues with the Upper Hale Road. It's a lovely road in places, but it's narrow. It takes far too much traffic, like most of our roads. And I think if we are going to develop this piece of land, and heaven knows it needs developing, it is not a thing of beauty and it's been hanging around for a long time. But back to the best being the enemy of the good, I just don't think this is acceptable. I don't think it's of a high enough standard to be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I wonder if we could go back to the original plan at the start of the officer's report. And showing where the proposed buildings are.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, perhaps you could clarify. To my mind, there are clearly 7 dwellings, but there are 4 houses because most of those dwellings are semi-detached. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, so you've got so 4 3-bed semi-detached at the back.
Yeah.
You've got a 3-bed, say semi-detached as well there, and then this is just a masonette on each floor.
Right. Thank you. I mean, to my mind, the density on the plan level, disregarding the height for a moment, is not dissimilar from the local area. I do accept that the building line is brought forward for its neighbours on the street, and also it's a bit taller than some of the properties. What worries me too is on the left as we look at it, is it number 106? I can't quite read it. Yes. It seems very close. Not that one, the other side to the left. That's it there. It seems very, very close to one of those rear properties?
So they've done obviously it's not a material planning consideration, but number 1010 actually support the development.
Yeah.
They've done a daylight assessment specifically on this relationship. It's found there's one window on the side elevation that would be marginally deficient of BRE guidance, but actually there'd be more direct sunlight. So BRE guidance isn't always prescriptive, and it's a balance, but overall it finds it wouldn't actually be particularly deficient in light, given the sort of already close relationship, the site level difference. So that was seen as fine. And as I go through in my report, the actual relationship with all the other properties in residential amenity terms is acceptable. I know members have brought about the setback issue. I would note, going to the aerial plan, these properties here are sat directly on the road, as are this property here is sat closer than would be the proposed dwelling. These properties as well up here are sat closer to the road than this dwelling. So it is a very varied form and vernacular in the area. Plot sizes equally, there's a number of plot sizes in that surrounding that are notably less than what is proposed here. So I would just bear that in mind in my recommendation to you.
Thank you. I have to say, while quite understanding the concerns of residents and their representatives, this seems to me just within the bounds of acceptability, and obviously cognizant that at appeal, I think we would find it very difficult to defend our position. So somewhat reluctantly, unless there's any other sort of evidence, I would be voting in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Gale and then Councillor Beaman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've got a lack of a 5-year housing supply, but I really don't think that means we should just approve schemes which are obviously overdevelopment or inappropriate to the existing surroundings. We need housing, but I don't think we need housing at any cost. And we have heard that the residents would welcome this site to be developed, but not quite that density. I have a question about these trees, T2, T3 and T4, which I believe are on a neighbouring property. Can the officers tell me if adequate protection has been allowed for these trees? Thank you.
Yes, so the Council's Tree and Landscape Officer has reviewed the arboricultural information and they're satisfied with what it's proposing on those particular trees. It is some ground protection, fencing and no dig surfacing in that particular area, but they considered that would be acceptable in this instance.
Councillor Beaman.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Whilst this site may be technically just about acceptable for 7 dwellings, I think its location and as for reasons so eloquently expressed by councillors Catherine Powell and Tony Fairclough, who are the local members, I cannot see that 7 dwellings are appropriate in this particular location, and I cannot support this scheme.
Thank you, Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do agree with Councillor Weldon's comment on this, and I applaud his, shall we say, relaxation of his view that there is a balance here, and that balance needs to be met. I appreciate that Sam has done a lot of work on this to get policy approval on it, and you know that's seen and we can see it. Could I just, on behalf of the people of Farnham, though, just make a point, Sam, and I'm saying this in to be reasonable and fair, but on page 98, we have reference there, second paragraph down, to policy FNP 15 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. Are we okay?
Yes, yeah, I've got that page.
Farnham Neighbourhood Plan states that proposals for 1 or 2 bedroom dwellings on smaller sites within built-up area will be encouraged where they would fit with the character of the area As discussed, the proposal would fit in with the character of the area, and this proposal would provide one number, one bed, and one number, two bed properties. What it doesn't say is it's providing five three-bed properties. Am I right?
Yeah, but it's still proposing one or two bed properties as part of that mix.
Yeah,
So we're
okay. Look, all right. I'm just on behalf of the people of Farnham and myself as a councillor, I just find this a little bit cynical.
Thank you, Councillor White.
All
Thank
right,
you.
okay, close me down. But I just have a concern that we pull out a clause like that, which is not reasonable. Thank you.
Members, I think I just do need to remind you that you sit on the planning committee as a member of the council and not a representative of the borough, and not representing individual parts of the borough. So just to remind members of that, because that's something that you are very much reminded of during various training sessions, and obviously is within your own protocol as part of the planning committee.
Thank you. I do accept that.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Councillor Monroe says, there's always a danger of losing a planning appeal where we don't have a 5-year housing supply. That's absolutely correct. But I think in this particular application, I think we'd have a good chance of winning an appeal because there's so many. It's very clearly a case of overdevelopment in my view. And I agree with the other councillors and what Councillor Weldon says in the introductory comment, that although he is normally always in favour of providing the extra housing, in this case he sees the reason not to, and if he believes that, I support his view. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? No. Councillor Fairclough, would you like to sum up? No. Another view? Should we vote on this? So as last time we met, I think the room is possibly not minded to agree the recommendation. Therefore, is there an alternate proposal from the floor, please? With reasons.
Over intensification and propose to reduce the number of units.
Do you have a seconder? So we have a proposal in Councillor White's words, intensification. I think that's possibly overdevelopment, seconded by Councillor Beeman. Therefore, that is the proposal. And when lights show, please vote.
Sorry, members, if you're reminded to refuse, you will need to add 2 additional reasons for refusal. The first being the lack of financial contributions for the SANG and SAM, and the second being the lack of a 106 to secure the visibility displays.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, David. And overspill into other roads and so on. And I don't think that was adequately covered, in fact. I don't know if other members of the committee would agree that we should include that as a reason for refusal.
There was a proposal. It was seconded. So, members, I don't want to.
Chair.
Councillor White.
Chair, take too much to confuse me. I'm confused. So that was the motion. The Assistant Director of Planning is suggesting that that is not adequate. Could she advise us what would be adequate, please?
So members, my advice to you, if you're minded to vote on refusal, is that you need 2 additional reasons for refusal, one relating to the lack of 106 to secure Sang and Sam, and the second additional reason would be lack of 106 to secure the visibility displays across the adjoining land.
Councillor Beeman.
Just clarify, I take the point made by Councillor MacLeod here, but I would think that parking is in fact part of the reasons because it's overdevelopment, is it not?
So members, it's you've resolved to vote on an alternative recommendation to refuse, and you've been seconded. So I think if you want to then add an additional reason, then that now needs to be proposed, and then you vote and seconded, and then you need to confirm all the reasons for refusal you are going to vote on before you then vote, so that everybody is clear what you are then refusing planning permission on the grounds.
Councillor Gale and then Councillor Coburn.
So if we want to refuse, we have to give 3. I think that's what I'm getting from Claire. And the 3 would be overdevelopment, the lack of a 106 agreement on the splay, and the lack of a Sang. Is that correct, Claire?
So members, you can choose to refuse it on whatever grounds you wish to. So if you want to add additional grounds, then that needs to be added to your proposal and then seconded before you vote. But what I'm recommending to you is that you do add those 2 technical reasons on the lack of 106. They're just technical reasons. You know, obviously a developer will turn up and appeal with a UU to secure those, or a agreed 106, and they'll fall away. But nevertheless, if you don't secure them, we'll never secure those.
Could I propose a refusal on those 3 grounds that I just gave? And could somebody second it?
We have one proposal which is seconded. So should we just vote on that one first? So we're going to vote on the original proposal, which was seconded. If that falls, then we can add yours in if you have a seconder.
I'm prepared to withdraw it. I mean, I'm prepared to withdraw it if it's replaced with the alternative.
It was seconded.
What is the alternative?
Nobody's proposed it or seconded. The proposal put forward by Councillor Gale has not been seconded. So we have 2 proposals.
So do you want us to vote on Councillor White's first? Is that what we're saying? He can't. The chair has just said he can't withdraw it.
Okay, can we just be clear? Councillor White, can you confirm what you are wanting the members to refuse this application on?
Yes, over intensification of the site. That's it.
And it's just that you don't want any additional reasons for refusal?
Claire, we may not be allowed to do this, but I'm prepared to accept your advice on the best way of presenting this to the PINS inspector. And we would value your advice as to what is the best way to present this. Clearly, there is a mood in the room where we feel there's too much bulk on the site. It's too much development. So what is the best way for us to present this to the PINS inspector, please?
So I think your first reason for refusal, that from what you've all said, is that the proposed development represents an overdevelopment of the site, that it doesn't protect the character of the area or the street scene, and therefore would be in conflict with policies RD1 of the local plan, DM4 and FNP1 of the neighbourhood plan. So we've got 3 policy reasons to underpin that. My suggestion is that you also add the 2 reasons that the proposal does not secure adequate SANG and SAM contributions in the absence of 106, and therefore is contrary to the relevant policy in the local plan relating to infrastructure and mitigation, and also that the proposal does not secure a 106 to enable the adequate visibility displays to be delivered, and therefore is contrary to the relevant policy in the local plan that requires safe access and egress from a site.
Thank you. All of the above.
And that is seconded by Councillor Beeman. So that is the proposal now, that that we object on the grounds that have been accepted by Councillor White and Councillor Beeman. Yep. So when lights show, please vote, remembering that if you're voting in favour, well, you're voting in favour of the changed proposal.
Thank you, Chair. We have 8 in favour, 1 abstention and 2 against.
Thank you. So that is refused. So our next application is WA 2026 00052 at Sandlands, Woodland Avenue, Cranley. And Sam, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. So the third application under consideration at committee is Sandlands in Cranley. It's a minor material amendment under section 73 of the original planning permission, WA 2024-01889, to add a sill phasing plan. That original permission was for the demolition of the existing dwelling and erection of 5 new properties with associated access and landscaping, which previously came before the planning committee in July of last year and was granted. This application has been brought before the planning committee given the number of comments contrary to the officer's recommendation. So just to remind members, this is the site in question with the existing property. No material works to officer's knowledge have taken place thus far. This was the scheme that was approved. You had the 2 dwellings to the front and 3 properties to the rear. And so this is the sill phasing plan. So as an application under section 73 that is only concerned with the addition of the sill phasing plan, that is the only change. It would be unreasonable to revisit the principle of the entire development and technical details which were agreed in that July committee. In terms of sill phasing, this allows for a 4-phase sill payment, and the sill team have noted the work shown do clearly indicate acceptable triggers for commencement of development to collect said monies or to serve the relevant liability notices. There was some concern from neighbours that phasing will just prolong construction disturbance. However, stated in the report, there is nothing to stop a developer starting the works in phases and prolonging development over a number of years, regardless of a sill phasing plan. The statutory 3-year time limit condition only requires a developer to commence the approved scheme within 3 years. As soon as the development has lawfully commenced, there is no time limit on completion of a scheme. So the sill phasing plan here is still only concerned with the phasing of sill payments and would not necessarily increase the timescales of the project beyond what a developer could already do. Therefore, the PPG says that local planning authorities should be working positively with developers to allow such developments to be delivered in phases. Therefore, there is no planning presumption against the change, and the proposal would continue to be in accordance with the development plan officers are recommending approval of this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. We have two speakers. The first is Mr. Martin Stiles. Mr. Stiles, you have 4 minutes from when you start.
Good evening, Lady Chairman and committee members. I'm Martin Stiles and speaking on behalf of the Woodland Avenue Residents Association, myself as a resident and the wider community. My family and I have lived in Woodland Avenue for approaching 20 years, and I've lived in Cranley most of my life since the late 1960s. Prior to preparing for this brief speech, I asked Google, what is the purpose of the Town and Country Planning Act? The answer in brief was as follows: to ensure a managed system where development is permitted by the state to ensure that urban and rural growth benefits the community, economy and environment. Also, the Act is often summarised as ensuring that planning serves the public interest and balances the need for new development with the protection of natural and built environments and local communities. There is a reference here to balance between the built environment and community. With the foregoing in mind, I'd like to put a question to the Chamber. Why are we here this evening? It is, of course, to discuss various planning applications and debate their pros and cons, but we are here for a more important reason than that, and that is because we all care. We are seeking to safeguard residents and ensure that their views and well-being are considered and respected. The original scheme was approved as a single integrated development of 5 dwellings. It has now been split into 4 separate phases, resulting in multiple conditions being rewritten and diluted. Residents positively support condition 18. This is an important issue because of the biodiversity erosion that has already taken place. We appreciate that the majority of this will happen off-site and want to understand more about when and where this will take place, including what monitoring there will be to ensure compliance. Waverley are being asked to consider a SIL phasing plan to financially help the developers, but Waverley have also a duty of care to residents, but to date their voice has not been heard. There were over 40 objections to the original application, highlighting legitimate concerns. Residents don't believe that Waverley are taking any concerns into account, including those of the parish council. There is no balance between the needs of the developers and the residents. We are requesting that if this application is approved, additional conditions should be discussed and implemented to protect the environment and local community. Road safety remains the main concern for the residents. It is felt that safety issue is being ignored and the phasing of this development will exacerbate the problem. It is requested that construction vehicles should not be allowed to park in Woodland Avenue, which is designated public footpath. There are no formal footpaths either side of the street. The road is used and the verges. A condition should be imposed that all construction vehicles park on site, with the rear land now available because of this phasing, ensuring that the avenue, which is a designated footpath, is kept clear and safe for road users, Park Mead school children and other users. The current condition of the road is poor and deteriorating. Prolonged construction work will compound this issue. Residents require a reassurance that the road will be maintained during and after construction and completed as necessary. The impact on residents will be considerable, with increased dust and airborne pollution, noise and disturbance. Whilst it is accepted that development will take place, I reiterate that residents feel strongly that there should be a better balance between the needs of the developers and the needs of local residents. In conclusion, if you grant this application, we request that you consider what has been said and the proposed reasonable conditions suggested by residents. Waverley have listened to the developer and we would like you to listen to the residents and other objectors. This is because we care and we do not want to see damage and problems arise because of this development. There is a balance to be struck as noted at the beginning of the speech, and we respectfully ask the committee members to consider this balance and introduce conditions that are not unreasonable nor impose any significant financial burden on the developer. Thank you for listening and we look forward to hearing your responses.
Thank you, Mr. Stiles. And our next speaker is Chris French. Yep, you have 4 minutes from when you start, Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I'd like to begin by thanking officers for their clear and comprehensive report. I'll just briefly highlight a couple of the key points. The applicant remains fully committed to delivering this scheme, and the application before you does not propose any changes to what would be built. It simply introduces a phasing plan to support the delivery. This would assist with the cash flow across the development process. Importantly, this does not indicate that the development will take any longer to complete. In any event, once development has commenced, there is no statutory timeframe for completion within the planning system. The introduction of a phasing condition could in fact improve delivery of the scheme by allowing cash flow across the development process to be managed more effectively. This approach is supported by planning practice guidance, which sets out that local authorities should work positively with developers to enable schemes to be delivered in phases. We therefore welcome the officer's positive recommendation and respectfully request that members approve the application in line with the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. So members, the floor is yours. Councillor Coburn.
Well, there's not a lot we can do. This is, in planning terms, fairly minor, isn't it? And as we've heard, by saying it's going to be phased doesn't actually alter necessarily what's going to happen. So, but, I take on board what the resident said. And my question really was just, is there anything we can do to improve what we've already agreed, that would help residents? Because he's right, we're here to represent everybody. But in terms of changes to a planning application, this is fairly minor in planning terms, and I don't have any choice whatsoever but to just support the officers. But as I say, if we can make a gesture that helps the local residents, then so be it. So we should.
So members, I think the point that has been made, and I remember it being made when this was discussed at the previous committee, was around parking during the construction phase. And you'll see that the report suggests that condition 15, as part of any CEMP, details of the phasing will need to be considered. So there is, I think as one of the residents suggested, an opportunity potentially for the site to be used for parking because it is now a structured phase development. But we would need to, I think, let the applicant and his agent hear that this evening and then consider that when they come forward with the details to discharge that condition.
Are there any other speakers? No? So when lights show, please vote.
Thank you, Chair. That appears to be unanimous in favour of the changes.
Thank you. So that is carried. Thank you. A 5-minute break then. Okay. Timing. Yeah. So we're back, everybody, and our next application is WA 2025-01270, Old Compton Lane, Waverley Lane. This is for approval of reserved matters, and the officer is Shane, when you're ready. Oh, Councillor Beeman, before
Yeah,
we
thank
start.
you. Before we go into this particular detail, I was advised actually, just perhaps to start this meeting, that because I'd received a letter from one of the objectors, which I then circulated as I thought was right to the rest of the planning committee, but without any, and I acknowledge the email I received, but I didn't express any view as to one way or the other, but that can be construed as that I had supported the objection. And I have to take I'll take your advice that I cannot participate in the discussion or vote in this particular application, or the one following for that matter.
Thank you, Councillor Beeman. So Shane.
So just to confirm, Councillor Beeman, are you saying that you'd already come in determining in your mind you were decided where you were going, or did you come into the room with a open mind? I was about to say blank mind, but that's my mind, open mind, and therefore you can still listen to and vote on the application, just so that we're clear. And only you know what you had in your mind when you came in the room.
The reason why, I mean, like all good counsel, I believe that, you know, that when you receive something from well, it's not my fault even, but I mean, I received something from a person, and it was quite late. I just circulated the rest of the planning committee in good faith, without any expressing any view one way or the other. That I just thought that everybody ought to be aware of all the arguments. In that sense, I did approach this meeting with a clear mind.
Then you are open-minded.
Yes, believe it or not, I am.
You've assured us that you had an open mind, and that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This item is two applications, important to say, for land west of opposite Old Compton Lane, Waverley Lane, Farnham. Now, they are two identical applications, so I will be presenting one proposal, and if I slip and say application, everything I say applies to both equally because they're identical and will be treated as such. So this application is for reserved matters for appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, following an outline granted permission under appeal for the erection of 146 dwellings, including 37% affordable housing and an on-site sign. The application also includes a discharge of pre-commence or conditions that were on the outline approval, and that will be discussed as well. So the background on this is that there was in July 2023, following an inquiry, the inspector had granted approval for outline permission and all matters reserved except access for the 146 units and the SAG. This decision was accompanied by a signed Section 106 agreement, and which secured the delivery of the SAG, play areas, SUDs, and the management thereof. This application or applications is for the reserved matters of the remaining items of layout, scale, appearance, landscaping. So looking at the outline appeal, you can see the illustrative master plan that was considered by the inspectorate, and then you can see the approved access plan that is approved by the inspector's decision. You can see here the location, which is a site which is subdivided by Waverley Lane. So you have a northern part of the site and you have a southern part of the site, and the most southerly part of the site is where the SAG is proposed. You can see the environment there as well. Here is the proposed layout. and I will talk you through some of the concepts behind the proposed design. You can see that integral to the proposed design is a green buffer around the proposed housing. You can see the yellow is the sang, in purple is the proposed leaps, and the green buffer is preserved around the proposed development, except for one key aspect which I will discuss now. This slide shows the design of the proposed access on the northern part of the site. Sorry, just go back. And you can see a two-way access for the proposed village green concept to the north access of the site, which is between the proposed access, vehicle access, and then there is an approved pedestrian crossway further up. Through pre-applications discussions, this village green concept emerged to create a better public appearance of the development with a primary frontage behind around an open accessible space. A similar concept was employed for the design of the entrance of the southern part of the site. And within the inspector's decisions, it was noted the need to create gaps for the proposed accesses. What was also noted was the need to cut back the hedging at the perimeter of the site for visibility displays. And it was actually during the course of the pre-application discussions that this evolved into the concept of the village green. Here you can see the different types of housing proposed. You have a variety of different types of housing, from detached to semi-detached to linked detached to terraced. And what you have is you have a primary frontages on the north side of the site and on the southern side of the site, which have slightly larger buildings. And you can see that here, where you can see around the village green at the front, where on the northern side you can see slightly larger buildings, and a similar motif on the southern application site. And then centrally in the site there are slightly smaller buildings, and around the edges there are two-story detached houses, so primarily two-story detached houses. This is a street scene. This shows you looking from Waverley Lane up north. So you can see again the village green concept, and you can see the variety of different housing types and different materials and finishes, reflective of the Surrey vernacular. And then you can see the street scene as you enter the site, the street scene below, which is as you enter the southern part of the site, you can see again this clustering around an open space. The sang is kind of an integral part of the development, and you can see here in this image how it's integrated into the design of the proposed housing. And you can see on this the plan, and you can see that the sang on the southern part of the site. So on the southern part, a lot of the houses face towards the sang, and then you can see another street scene here and the variety of housing. This is the proposed landscaping and proposed planting. The application was revised based on comments from an independent landscape consultant, and the resultant is what you have is a detailed landscaping plan, which primarily tries to preserve the existing hedging, except for the access of the existing hedging around the site, and proposes additional planting where appropriate as well. We have also attached a couple of conditions to ensure the longevity of that planting. Here you can see the affordable housing, which was secured by the Section 106, which is a 37% provision, which and it would be in clusters dispersed throughout the site. Here you can also see something that's within the Section 106, but there's also condition 5 of the outline approval, which is for a leap on the northern part of the site, a leap on the southern part of the site, a lap, as well as a connecting trail concept that links in with the sang, and also links in with the village green. So given the approval of the outline application and the signed Section 106 agreement and the details given regarding the proposed layout, scale and appearance and landscaping, and the benefit of the delivering of housing and in particular affordable housing, the reserved matters for both applications recommended for approval. And also recommended for approval is discharge is the conditions 8, 21, 23 and 24. The BNG condition is not discharged at this time given the nature of the wording of the condition on the outline approval. A condition is for BNG is attached that continues on that as an issue. So that's yeah, the reserved matters are recommended for approval. Including, please note, there are additional conditions and amendments to conditions on the update sheet.
Thank you. There are 7 speakers. The first is Pamela Pownall. You have 4 minutes from when you start to speak.
My name is Pamela Pownall and I represent the South Farnham Residents Association. With the first proposals for this site in 2015, there were over 1,100 individual objections and unprecedented response. This site was never intended for development. It is in the countryside on a narrow lane, a historic one at that, leading on to Waverley Abbey in the valley below. The site was specifically excluded from the allocation of sites in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan because of its high landscape sensitivity and high landscape value. It is an area of ancient woodland and veteran trees with all the flora and fauna that such an environment supports. However, outline permission was granted at appeal. We had to accept that and hoped to ensure the best possible outcome for local residents. We were encouraged to learn that Miller Homes were to develop the site. Their build out at Deer Park in the centre of Farnham looks good. Well-designed houses, a layout sympathetic to the immediate location, discreetly shielded with retained hedging and greenery, almost out of view of the road. Very classy. Unfortunately, this is not what is now planned for Waverley Lane. At the appeal hearing for Waverley Lane, the inspector was presented with a vision of a project with emphasis on respecting the countryside location, by providing greenery and screening with the least possible impact on the existing valued landscape as viewed from the lane. She talked about glimpsed views into the site. It was on this basis that she granted her permission for the development. By the applicant's own admission, they proposed to open up a wide, unencumbered view into the site with a village green backed by high 2.5-storey and 3-storey buildings facing out onto the lane. More like an advert for the housing developer rather than somewhere you would choose to live. This layout is not appropriate here. It is too large, too high, and too open to the lane. This site is, after all, in the countryside, not in the centre of Woking. The developer has demonstrated a level of disrespect for this committee by assuming that you will grant this reserved matters application this evening. They've jumped the gun. Earlier this month, their contractors removed a huge amount of hedging on both sides of the lane, way beyond that which had been permitted for the access under the outline permission. What was an ancient hedgerow has now been unnecessarily destroyed. Have we learnt nothing from COVID and lockdown about the benefit of nature and greenery? And on that point, the whole development site would have been included as part of the revised AONB, had it not been for the timing of the appeal hearing. Compton Copse, right next door to the northern field, and the Sang within the site, and the land immediately to the southeast of the central field will all become part of the AONB when the revisions are ratified. Waverley's own policies state that views in and out of the A and B should be carefully considered when nearby development is proposed. No amount of new screening will block the view of a housing estate with 2.5 and 3-storey buildings in a neighbouring field. In the headlong rush to fulfil the council's housing quota, an inappropriate development is planned. There is no consideration of the location nor to the density of housing in the immediate neighbourhood as policies say should happen. At the very least, this decision should be deferred to give the applicant time to revise their plans to provide something more in keeping with the neighbourhood. Fewer numbers, lower density, lower physical profile, rather than cramming in as many houses as possible onto 2 fields. The committee should also ensure that the unnecessary damage to the perimeter hedging is properly restored with sufficient screening in acknowledgement of the sensitive location of the site. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Niels Fullerton Batten. You have 4 minutes from when you start.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak on this matter today. Our family home sits directly behind the proposed sewage pumping station, with the public pathway planned along another boundary without any screening. This would affect us on multiple sides, with both infrastructure and public access immediately next to where my young family lives and spends time outdoors. My concern is not the principle of this development, but that based on the committee report, there's simply not enough information for the committee to properly assess the impact of this proposal. We have not been consulted by the developer or the planning officer. While I understand they are busy, it is disappointing that we have not received a response despite contacting the planning officer several times. This lack of communication makes it difficult to understand what is proposed and have confidence in how potential impacts will be managed. My specific concerns are as follows. First, sewage pumping station details. The report describes the station as mostly subterranean, but there are no clear details about its size above ground, or about noise, odour, maintenance, or screening. It is also unclear why lower impact or fully below ground options have not been considered, given how close it is to existing homes. The report also does not say who will install, operate, or maintain the station long term. While this would normally fall to Thames Water, this is not confirmed, which raises concerns about coordination with the relevant utility providers, particularly as South East Water are not responsible for sewerage. Second, noise and environmental impacts. The report recognises there may be noise from the pumping station, but leaves the details of how this will be addressed until later. This means the committee is being asked to approve the application before the full impacts are properly understood. Third, public pathway and privacy. There are no clear measures to protect privacy or reduce disturbance, and no defined boundary treatment to safeguard neighbouring homes. Even the report notes that boundary planting needs strengthening, which suggests the current proposals are not sufficient. Taken together, these factors create a significant cumulative impact that has not been properly assessed. There also appear to be practical alternatives, such as relocating the pumping station, placing it underground, or improving screening. But it is not clear that these have been fully explored. For these reasons, I respectfully ask the committee to defer the application until these matters have been properly assessed. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. David Neame. You two have 4 minutes from when you start.
Good evening, members. My name is David Neame from Neame Sutton Limited. We are the planning agents acting for Miller Homes, the applicant. Members, you'll note that the applications this evening comprise the full reserve matters details submitted pursuant to the outline consent on the site for up to 146 dwellings, including 37% on-site affordable housing, open space, a SANG, landscaping and new vehicular accesses. In this respect, as your officer's report confirms, the details that these applications deal with are the details of appearance, layout, landscaping and scale. The principle of development, the detail of the accesses, including the pedestrian routes from Waverley Lane, the provision of SANG and other matters such as the position of the pump station, hedgerow and tree removals have all been dealt with and approved as part of the outline consent. Members, I appreciate that the planning history on this site has been controversial. However, an outline planning consent has been granted, and these reserve matters are being progressed by Miller Homes to enable the delivery of much needed new homes in Farnham. The applicant's design team has worked hard to prepare a suitable residential layout and detailed building design that meets the council's policy requirements and also the national design guidance. We've worked with your officers over an extensive period of time, as well as engaging with Farnham Town Council to achieve the right design solution that will create a high quality residential environment that is an attractive place to live. This has included detailed pre-application discussions, as have been noted in the officer report. You'll also note that the council went to the extent of instructing an independent landscape consultant to provide a thorough review of the landscape proposals before you, and the recommendations made by that consultant have been incorporated through amendments to the scheme. The scheme presented to you this evening reflects the core principles established through the outline consent and provides an appropriate mix and type of dwellings that are appropriate in terms of their design, scale, massing, and the use of materials in the surrounding context. If I can just highlight a couple of points, the provision of new homes to be delivered by Miller Homes that, as has already been noted, have a proven track record for delivery in Farnham, and this is particularly important at a time when the council has such an acute housing need. In addition, the provision of 37% on-site affordable homes, which is above your policy requirement, and members, you'll be aware that the council has also recently purchased 19 affordable homes from Miller Homes on their site in Hale Road. Together with the provision of on-site SANG, and Miller has been working with Farnham Town Council, which has an interest in taking the management of the SANG going forward. This is subject to detailed work which is ongoing, but the management of the SANG by the Town Council would make a positive contribution to the local community as a publicly accessible community asset, which links to a wider network of amenity green space, including the recently approved Moore Park strategic SANG. Appreciate that members of the community have raised objections to the scheme. The planning issues raised by those objections have been taken seriously by both the applicant's team and officers, and the scheme has been amended and additional information supplied to address the points raised during the processing of the reserve matters, and this is noted in your officer's report. I just want to touch very briefly on the comment about recent removal of hedging along Waverley Lane, and just to make crystal clear that that removal is in full accordance with the consented access and visibility space under the terms of the outline consent. So just to conclude, as a result of your officer's report recommends that these reserve matters applications are approved, and I respectfully request that you accept that recommendation and grant approval this evening. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Neame. Our next speaker is Councillor Carol Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've been involved in this site since the beginning as well, although the field only moved into the Bourne in 2023. The SANG has always been part of the Bourne and always been dear to my heart because, of course, it goes down to the Bourne stream. I've been disappointed in this chamber many a time, but I'm afraid this application, when it came in, I was really beyond disappointed. I drove here tonight past this site, it's my normal way here, and it is so sad to see what we were trying to preserve completely ripped apart. We accept the decision, that's not an issue. We know that this site is going to be built out. That isn't an issue at all now. But why the reason that we did not want, well, one of the many reasons we didn't want to build on this site, and remember we put in 3,005 homes into the neighbourhood plan. It's not as though we didn't allocate housing, but we wanted to maintain these 3 green corridors into the town from the protected south, because the south has the national landscapes, the protected landscapes, but the 287, Tilford Road and Waverley Lane, as they come into the town, we wanted that to be a transition. And in fact, the previous inspector did talk about the rural nature of Waverley Lane, and that is what we wanted to protect. We wanted, as you drive down past this new development, that you would only have a limited view of what's going on. That's what the inspector wanted. That's what the inspector said. I agree that there would be glimpsed views of the site from this part of Waverley Lane, even after mitigation. So we're talking glimpsed views. And that is what most of us expected, that the hedgerow would largely remain intact. There would obviously be visibility displays, we knew that. But what has been proposed here, and where this comes from, I have no idea. A village green on a green entrance into a town with architecture and buildings that relate in no way to their surroundings. I just genuinely don't understand how we've ended up with this as reserve matters. It cannot be the best use of this land. When you see that picture that Shane showed us, it's just so open. They're just going to open up. They've already grubbed out the hedgerow. They're going to open it all up and have this village green look. That'll probably end up as a car park, because that's one of the things I think should be reviewed. I don't think there's enough parking on this site. The Sang, I don't think the fact that you're talking to the town council is strong enough. We need to know that this Sang is going to be maintained in perpetuity and that the Bourne Stream is going to be protected. The biodiversity net gain, we need to know now that this is actually going to work. And the inspector put on a special condition about the BNG, and yet we seem to be watering that down as well. If we are serious about providing good amenity space for residents, future occupiers and current occupiers, if we're serious about nature recovery, then we have to take this site, this type of site, very seriously indeed. And I am sorry, I think that what we have here is a complete disappointment, nothing like it the inspector envisaged. And well, I shall say no more. I just think it's inappropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, and thank you for allowing me to speak. We are considering this reserved matters application in the context of 58 objection letters. Can I just say that these are not casual objections or NIMBY responses. They come from members, neighbours and local residents who care deeply about the loss of nature and the character of this special area. The central feature of this proposal is what being described as a village green. However, this appears to be more of an illusion. It could be seen as a pastiche rather than a genuine community asset. The positioning of the taller buildings at the front of the development give the impression of openness, while in reality concealing the overall density behind. And this risks becoming a form of heritage washing, invoking an idea of a traditional village green without delivering its function or its spirit. Will cricket be played on it? Will there be a maypole? Well, I think this is highly unlikely. I think there will be restrictions on what this village green can be. I think there will be a sign saying no ball games. And then turning to the hedgerows, approximately 60 metres of a 100-metre hedgerow is proposed for removal to facilitate the space. And with the majority, as Councillor Coburn said, I drove past tonight, where most of it removed. This is a significant and irreversible loss of established habitat, which simply cannot be recreated elsewhere. And this leads me to the biodiversity net gain strategy. And while 10% uplift is required, it appears this cannot be achieved on-site. So instead, the proposal relies on an off-site biodiversity credits. And this raises serious concerns as it disconnects the ecological compensation from the local environment, meaning this community bears the loss while any gains are realized elsewhere. And then there is the issue of the pumping station, which will operate 24 hours a day, yet there's been no clear noise assessment. And the potential for a continuous low-frequency hum could significantly impact nearby residents, particularly Mr. Fullerton Batten, who spoke earlier. And this uncertainty needs to be addressed before any approval of these can be considered. Parking and transport assumptions also appear madly unrealistic and against the council's current policy. The development of 146 houses likely equates to over 300 residents. And now with only 287 allocated spaces. So perhaps there is a hope that these 4 and 5 bedroom houses do not have large families. The proposal also places a heavy emphasis on cycling infrastructure, including electric bike storage and charging. However, this site sits on a large hill out of the town. Anyone familiar with Waverley Lane will know this. So perhaps we're hoping for a new generation of Bradley Wiggins or Mark Cavendishes. I will also ask my colleague, Councillor Beeman, who is an expert on the local bus transport network, to inform members how frequent the bus service along Waverley Lane is into town. So I think this is just not reasonable to assume that such a high level of modal shift away from private cars in this location. So thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could have a minute at the end to sum up, that would be marvellous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've only got time to focus on 3 key points. The first is on the visual impact and specifically the hedgerows, where there's a clear disconnect between what the appeal inspector approved at the outline stage and what this report now presents for reserved matters. The inspector's outline consent was unambiguous. It relied heavily on the retention, strengthening and screening function of the site's existing hedgerows along the frontage to Waverley Lane. And we were told by the inspector that hedgerows would remain intact except for access. They would be strengthened and the views of the development would be limited, as we say, to glimpses of it with housing set behind landscaping. So that's the outline permission we're supposed to be building on now. But instead, this report presents a material shift in that position. It accepts additional hedgerow removal to create this open village green, but that's not what the appeal inspector approved. Remove that hedgerow and you move from filtered glimpses to open, designed views, deliberately intended to give the development greater prominence, as clearly illustrated in the images you've seen tonight and the lost hedgerows you've all just heard about. And I'm afraid rather than confronting this, the report introduces new design justifications that were never part of the balance considered and even constructed by the inspector. At outline, the inspector accepted harm only because it was tightly controlled by limited hedgerow removal, strong boundaries and screen development. Open up the frontage and you undo that mitigation. And I'm afraid replacement planting is not equivalent. Mature hedgerows provide immediate screening, new planting takes decades, and in the meantime, the glimpsed views assumption in the outline consent just fails. Next, I'm going to talk about biodiversity net gain, again, where the outline consent has an explicit condition, condition 10, where the inspector required a BNG strategy to be submitted and approved before or with the reserved matters application. This is a precondition, it's not a technicality, and it hasn't happened. The officer report confirms that a 10% gain is not demonstrated without unknown off-site credits, and that there's no clear delivery plan, and that the condition which the inspector set cannot be discharged. That should be the end of the matter, but instead the report rolls it forward into yet another condition. The inspector set that requirement as part of the planning balance, and it's supposed to be a safeguard, not something to be revisited later. Finally, I want to talk about SANG and habitats, where Natural England has made 2 submissions which are on the file. They remind us that the tests of the Habitats Regulations Assessment require that measures to mitigate potential impacts on habitat sites must be certain to succeed. And if the SANG management plan is unclear on some elements, including the costs, the management, and the manager, then they would advise that the application is not sufficient and would not pass appropriate assessment. And since, as it stands, a management company has not been elected and agreed in writing for the management of the SANG, it is by definition uncertain how and by whom the SANG will be managed, maintained, and funded in perpetuity. So this report asks you to treat this as something to resolve later. It can't be. The regulations require certainty before consent, not after. So in conclusion, this proposal is currently recommended either departs too far from the outline consent or leaves critical safeguards required now unresolved. So I do ask you please to seriously consider deferral so that these issues can be properly addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Councillor Andy MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. This application is unusual and it sits across 2 wards in Farnham, the Bourne, which 2 of our colleagues represent, and Moore Park, which Councillor Merriweather and I represent. I agreed with Councillor Merriweather that he would produce a joint statement from us both in the interest of time. But I do want to comment on one aspect which he didn't have time to fit into his 4 minutes. That is issues related to the pumping station. Now, I did receive the same email that Councillor Beeman received from Mr. Fullerton-Batten, and I did, as he's one of my residents, I did actually phone him up and speak to him about his concerns, and I was able to do that because I'm not sitting in the planning committee this evening on this item. I'm speaking as his ward councillor, and I have a great deal of sympathy with the concerns that he's outlined, and he requested that this application should be deferred for that reason. And I also very strongly agree, I'm also a member of SOFRA, with the comments made by Pamela Pownall and her request that the application should be deferred for reasons that she gave. So that's my principal point I want to make to the committee. Please strongly consider deferring this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. Before I open it up, Claire.
Yeah, members, there are just a few points that I just want to come back and just provide you with some clarity on. Firstly, just to confirm that the outline permission granted outline permission for up to 146 dwellings with all matters except the access reserved for the subsequent approval. So the only thing that has been improved by the outline is the access and not citing of anything. On the SANG, the legal agreement that's attached to the permission says that at point 1.2, prior to first occupation, to complete and open the use of the SANG in accordance with the SANG management plan and to notify the Borough Council in writing that the SANG has been completed, etc. So it then goes on to require various measures to ensure that the land is either leased or transferred and the SANG is there in perpetuity for 125 years, etc., etc. So the matters relating to the SANG, its future maintenance, etc., has already been secured through the outline permission. I'm going to just pass to Shane to just pick up on condition relating to the biodiversity net gain strategy, just to confirm what has been submitted and what the condition requires and what it will continue to require.
Thank you, Claire. So to do with biodiversity, I think what needs to be clarified, there is an obligation to, prior to or concurrent with the submission of reserve matters, to submit a biodiversity net gain strategy, which was done. If you notice on that condition, the second paragraph, there is on completion of each phase, an update to the BNG strategy should be submitted. So that condition introduced by the inspector introduced the concept of phasing the information regarding BNG. So hence, that's why the applicant is obliged on each phase to submit new information. Now, there was no phasing with this development, so it's kind of like let's call it a lack of clarity in this condition. So we've put on another condition that based on when certain level of development is reached, certain number of homes are built, they are obliged to submit further information to discharge this condition. So we've put on a condition to reflect the phasing nature of that condition. But in terms of meeting that, they did submit a strategy. So that hopefully tries to explain what is a bit of a muddled original condition. So it wasn't a straight of submit this and discharge it. There is a kind of ongoing phasing element to that condition.
Just to also add in the wording of that condition, and this is just for your information so you're 100% clear of the position, it does also refer to on-site and off-site habitat creation.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got a great deal of instinctive sympathy for the request for deferment. There's clearly great unease, in particular about the removal of hedging and the issues around the pumping station. I'm torn, however. You know, we've got to accept that this development in principle has already been accepted. The route to that acceptance is not ones which we like, but we are where we are. If we do defer, I can see two possibilities. One, we all come back in 2 or 3 months with officers having had detailed discussions again with the developers, and I accept they have already had discussions, and a scheme is can be submitted to us, which goes some way to mitigating those concerns. And then we will make a decision, and the assumption has to be, of course, that we accept it in principle. That's one route, but the other route is we all come back in 2 or 3 months, and we face exactly the same debates and arguments, and nothing really is achieved, and it just defers it, and we go on and on and on. I would vote for deferment if that's legally possible, if I could be persuaded that there's a really good chance of option 1 actually taking place rather than option 2, and be really grateful for advice on that.
So members, obviously one of your decision options is to defer, and in doing so you need to be very, very, very specific about why you're deferring and what you are expecting the developer to do. So could I just give you some advice? Obviously, the hedge has been removed, so deferring it for the removal of the hedge isn't going to bring the hedge back. So you will, deferral is absolutely an option, and you have already been advised that there is already an outline permission in place. So revisiting the principle of this is not an option that's open to you. But members, you just need to give thought to what you want to see the developer doing, or what additional information, because it might be that you want to defer to get that additional information, additional comfort about the pumping station, and to assess its impact on adjoining residents.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to approach this with two separate deliveries. One, my views as regard the development, and the other one asking the officer just for clarification. I think in view of the timing and the number of people to speak, I'll put the three things all together and try and package them up. So my first comment, and forgive me if I haven't looked at the detail sufficiently, but I have a major concern with Waverley Lane, the speed of traffic going down there. It's very closed in, and I'll come back to the other point regarding how it's proposed to open it out, which is totally inappropriate. But it's dangerous. It's a straight road. It's absolutely straight right the way through there. And what provision is there to protect pedestrians? Children will migrate from one play area to the other. They will want to go over and see their friends that are over at another area. What are we doing to protect them against being knocked over? That's number one. The other one that I've got is, I guess it's to do with the construction management plan. And I suspect the Assistant Director will tell me that's not for discussion tonight or whatever. But Informative 5 does tell us that the contractor will be required to conform to that plan. I am very concerned about this because we all know in this room there is another major development coming up in Farnham which has access approval. And the construction management plan there will be absolutely critical, as I believe this is as well, is how is that going to be dealt with? Is it just a question of saying you've got to have that? Yes, that's very nice, thank you. And then it's down to it's down to us, our planning department, to actually enforce it. Which is going to be very difficult at 6 o'clock in the morning when they start work. So that's that. And then I will go on then and take my view on this. I'm sorry. I mean, I was present at the meeting when the planner, the architect, they came to Farnham Town Council and they made out their delivery to us. And I'm sorry, somewhere they've lost the plot completely. I don't know what's happened here, but this is a totally different approach. And Waverley Lane, what is effectively a country lane, which has over time been widened, some by lorries that have trenched through the banks and so on and so forth. A lot of it is not curbed properly at all. And they're proposing to open this back to just completely destroy the atmosphere of when you go down that lane. Yes, we agree. We need houses. Yes, we agree. There's 146 allocated to that site. Yes, we agree they can build them. But for goodness sake, what is going on? To create a village green? We don't need another village green down there. We've got a very nice aspect around Waverley Abbey. People can go and walk there. They can enjoy that. We don't need another village green. And what we certainly don't want is a row of I'm not going to describe accordingly, but we can see, and fair play on page 141, the planning officer has included a full view of that, and appreciative of that because that tells us how ridiculous it's going to look. I don't know what else to say, but I'm not going to be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, having listened very carefully to all the speakers this evening and have read what you in the report, it seems to me that things have changed quite dramatically from where they started, from where the inspector, when she said, you know, this is to be glimpses of an estate, and it seems to me now it's in full view. And so, you know, it may be something that we're not allowed to talk about tonight, but it's fact. And a village green, well, it's not a village green, it's an extended verge really, isn't it? You can't really play cricket on there, you know, it's ridiculous. I know Waverley Lane quite well. I've driven along it many times, and it is a very narrow lane, and it is, I'm sure, quite quite a worry with young children. But my concern really is the pumping station. I mean, I have to say, where I live in Haysmere, there's a pumping station, and I know people that live near it, and it is quite noisy when it's at full volume. And you know, I would support, you know, a deferment, and I'd like to see the developer come back with a better resolution of how they're going to look after that pumping station, whether it's more underground or whatever. It's not fair on the residents to inflict something like this in their estate and for the neighbours to have to endure it. So, you know, for that very reason, I will support a deferment on this issue. Thank you.
Councillor White, I think you possibly asked some questions. You might have wanted some responses.
Yes,
on.
thank you.
So, Shane will get up the relevant slide, I think, that shows the speed measures that would be put in as part of the scheme, but going back to the fact that whether or not Waverley Lane is acceptable is already established in the permission, the outline permission. The construction environmental management plan is condition 16 of the outline permission, and it's got A to K in terms of the requirements that need to be submitted to us and then discharged by us and also enforced by us. So things like hours of work would be something where we would be agreeing with the developer what's the reasonable time, and normal sort of times are sort of 8 till 6 and maybe Saturday morning working and nothing outside that. So that's already secured in terms of submission of those details as part of the outline permission. Hopefully, we haven't. The screen's frozen. So, Shane, would you like to describe what you would have shown on the plan?
Yes, within the section 106, there would be there's a way of answering this that answers kind of 2 points. One to do with the removal of hedges, and the other to do with the speed on that road. Now, within the section 106, there is recommended signage to warn motors of 30 miles an hour. So that's within the section 106. I'm trying to get up a slide that I think hits upon 2 points to do with the village green and to do with passing motorists, and to do with the inspector's decision. Yeah, well, this will do. This is the approved access plan. So on the approved access plan, you do have a main entrance to the northern site, a main vehicle two-way entrance. And you do have further down, further to the east, you do have a pedestrian crossing or a crossing for pedestrians to the southern side. And as the councillor rightly pointed out, there would be traffic from the northern part of the site to the southern part of the site. Now, I think integral to the village green kind of concept is, although the inspectorate did give specific numbers for the amount of removal of hedgerows, he also noted that the existing hedgerows would have to be cut back to allow for visibility. And even if you were to say, and those hedgerows now removed, even if you were to put them back, you would have to take into account the need for visibility, given the access, given the pedestrian walkway across, and given motorists having some identification of the development. So I think that needs to be taken into account in what helped form the village green concept was a way for so that if you're passing along and you kept all the existing hedgerows there, there'd be two issues. One would be visibility sprays. You would have to cut back a good deal of what is now open. And the second would be, there would be no kind of visual incentive for motorists to slow down because they wouldn't see the development and they would just come across people crossing the street. So the idea evolved through pre-app that you need a kind of a primary kind of entrance as a way you can't hide a development to this side. I think it's also important to point out that the frontage houses here are set back a great deal from the roadside, and there is planting in front. So there is a level of preservation. So if there is a minded to an alternative landscaping or a scheme to come in that would put back some of that hedging, I think it's to bear in mind what that would look like, given the need for visibility sprays and the pedestrian crossing there. So I think that's an important point. The other point I'd like to address quickly is the pumping station. There are two conditions now on the with the update sheet. One asking for a noise assessment regarding the impact of the pumping station, and the other regarding elevations and massing to see the physical. Like it is my understanding that it is underground. It's also important to note that we have asked for these details over the last month. So, but we have two conditions there that we believe would safeguard the immunity of residents. So, hopefully that addresses a couple of those points. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Weldon.
Thank you. At this stage, I'm still unclear on which way I want to vote. However, I want to make just a few points. The first one, and the most important one, is that we have to live with the existing approval and the existing appeal decision. I've been picking up some contradictory messages on the detail of that, but I'm not going to go into that now. What I am concerned about is that I'm hearing some very strong opposition from people who know the area. I don't know the area at all. But people who do know the area clearly have some strong objections. What I haven't heard is clear grounds for material grounds for objecting. And we need that. If we're going to object, we need those material grounds, valid material grounds for objection. There is a suggestion that we simply ask for a deferment. The problem there is similar. If we want just ask to defer, what are we asking from the developer? Again, I haven't really heard clear statements of what we want, except that it must be better, and that's not good enough. I am not happy with the principle of deferment. As Councillor Munro pointed out, there are two possibilities. If we defer, we may come back in some future time and find that we can agree, or we can come back and find that we're back where we are. No decision. If that happens, we then, I think, run into the risk of losing an appeal on non-determination. If we are not happy, my belief is that we need to be straightforward and say we are not happy and object. But for that, again, we need to find clear grounds for objecting. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I've got this right, I think what Shane has told us tonight, outline permission was granted for up to 146 homes. All matters but barring the access were approved. That means it's the access we're looking at where they've created a village green. So that hasn't been approved. So that's where we have a sticking point, really. They've had to create an access for 146 homes, and in doing that, they've had to...
One moment, Councillor Gale.
Sorry.
No, just so I can confirm, the outline permission approves up to 146 dwellings with all matters except the access for subsequent approval. So the access is approved, everything else is the details you're now being asked to consider this evening.
Okay, I stand corrected. Sorry about that. But the problem is to make an access relevant so that you can have that many houses in there, which Shane has explained to us. You need the via displays and you need to make sure that the cars can see there's something coming. So in my mind, we're trying to put too many houses in there because we're having to do all this work on the frontage to make it viable for cars not to run people over. So I've got a problem there because we're having to open it up, which is something that the inspector didn't really envisage anyway. They wanted glimpses of properties, which we can't have if we have that many houses in there.
So just to confirm, whether it's 146 or 120, it will still need the visibility displays that have been demonstrated on this plan.
But maybe not to the extent of having such an open plan before it.
So members, I think there are two issues that maybe are beginning to be conflated with each other. This development needs to have a safe access, and to do that, it needs visibility displays. The development and the scheme layout has chosen in part to try and soften the impact of the development by the introduction of the village green. And I think it's village green that I'm hearing some comments about this evening, that it doesn't achieve that outcome.
Sorry, if I can just come just quickly. Yes, we have large developments in my village for over 100 houses, 190 houses. They don't have village greens in front of them to make them safe to drive in and out of. That's my point.
Councillor Munro.
Could I propose formally, and I hope that there's a seconder, that we defer this application on, to my mind, three main grounds. One, the location and effect of the pumping station needs further investigation by officers. Secondly, concerns on road safety also needs further dialogue with the developer. And secondly, thirdly, that the visual aspects, including the hedging, needs further consideration, whilst accepting, of course, that some removal of hedging is necessary and indeed has been mandated by the appeal inspector.
So members, if I could step in and try and help with some advice. So the location and the impact of the pumping station, if you're not satisfied that that can be dealt with by a condition, then you are reasonable to request a deferral to seek that information before you, for you to consider as part of the approval of reserved matters. There is no highway safe objection. So the access that has been proposed is safe and fit for purpose to serve this number of dwellings and would be required even if it was a slightly smaller number of dwellings. So members, I'd be unclear what it is that we would be asking anybody to do, including the county highway team, if it was deferred on those grounds. In terms of the hedge, I think possibly what you are saying, and just for clarification, is that you are not happy with the openness of introducing a village green, and that you would like the developer to revisit that element of the scheme to see that if there is more appropriate way of landscaping that area, and question whether you want it even identified as an open green, a village green, but you'd like that element to be revisited to try and create a development that is behind landscaping rather than an open area with landscaping behind it.
Well, that's what I said.
I thought that's what you might say.
But seriously, Chairman, I think I take your points about road safety, but concerns have been expressed here, and it's a pretty important issue. We're all agreed with that. So it's worthwhile going once round the houses, I think, on that aspect as well. But I know one should have an open mind. When I come back in 2 or 3 months, I'm not going to be asking for a further deferment, and we have one last chance, I think, and I think it's a good chance we get a better scheme, but only one chance.
Are you seconding that proposal to defer, Councillor White?
Chair, no, I'm not. I just wanted to to put into context what we've been talking about with the green, and I just want to get confirmation from the Assistant Director of Planning that the access that has been agreed would not be compromised by a suggestion that I have. It would just help. From my career background, I'm able to comment. Is there any reason why a bund could not be placed, which a plant with planting on the top of it, which is moved back to the, shall we say, the minimum or maximum splay start? So in other words, instead of a village green, there is a landscape feature that keeps the character of Waverley Lane, the rustic character of Waverley Lane, rather than new arrivals to Farnham believing there's a new village that suddenly appeared. Is that possible?
So members, you can, as a committee, I would suggest defer it. What you cannot do, I would suggest, is try and redesign a scheme, particularly when it's 10:15 on a Wednesday night. So can I really deter you from trying to?
Yes,
So-
you can.
So
That's what I was going to.
If I may, we have a proposal to defer on 3 reasons. Is there a seconder? There is. So do we vote on that? Or yeah. So we will vote on that proposal to defer. When lights show, please vote.
I've seen it done before. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 in favour, 1 abstention and 1 against.
So the deferral is carried. Apologies, councillor Murray, I didn't think you'd want to, no. We're doing this one. So we come to our last application this evening, which is WA 2025-01277, Old Compton Lane, Waverley Lane. Shane, would you like to say anything different? Yeah. So it is 10 to 10. We won't have the presentation again. You're very familiar with that, but we do have a speaker. We have Zafia Lovell. Would you like to speak? You have 4 minutes.
My name's Sophia Lovell and I'm chairman of the South Farnham Residents Association. Much has already been said tonight, therefore I will not go over old ground. Whilst we await the publishing of the draft rewritten NPPF, it is understood that it has not yet officially replaced the December 2024 version. The current NPPF emphasises that early, proactive and meaningful engagement which facilitates the effectiveness of the planning system, and within that ethos encourages applicants to work with communities. Sadly, Waverley Lane is just one of many sites now and in the future where community engagement will not happen. Our community had high hopes that Waits, Miller Homes would engage in some dialogue with our long-established residents association, given Miller Homes' commendable approach in discussions with local organisations on the Deer Park development site in Farnham. Sadly, this has not happened. Once the outline permission was granted, we were again encouraged by the words in the planning inspector's decision report, which suggested green buffers around the site and glimpsed views of the site, all of which, for the inspector, made the application more acceptable. Sadly, again, there's an awful lot of sadly in this, Sadly, again, when it came to the Reserve Matters application, this did not happen. It is understood by communities throughout the country that planning now is all about the numbers to be built. According to the Secretary of State, Steve Reed MP, it's build, baby, build. Councillors, we have heard much this evening. The community simply ask that this application be deferred to give both the applicant and the Residents Association the opportunity to engage in some constructive discussion, to have a few answers to questions as yet unanswered, to make constructive suggestions for minor improvements, overall to enable a development that both the applicant and the community can be proud of. Thank you all for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, given that you have already voted to defer, do you agree to do so again? Thank you. That ends the meeting.